As we drove away from the carnival, the rush of excitement we felt started to fade. The thrill of the night, filled with laughter and bright lights, was quickly replaced by a heavy sense of dread that settled in our stomachs. The colorful lights of the fairground faded into the distance, swallowed by the dark road that stretched ahead. I glanced at my friends in the car, Jake, Emma, Ben, and Sarah. Their faces mirrored my own unease, each of us grappling with an unsettling feeling that seemed to seep into the very air we breathed. The night had been so lively, filled with rides that made our hearts race and games that promised stuffed animals and candy. But now, the fun seemed like a distant memory. The air felt different, thick and charged, as if something was lurking just beyond the reach of our headlights. It was as if the darkness itself was watching us, waiting for us to let our guard down. Then came the smell. It crept into the car, wrapping around us like a damp blanket. It was a nauseating mix of old, rotting wood and something foul that made my stomach turn. I wrinkled my nose, hoping it would just disappear, but it only seemed to grow stronger. "Do you smell that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, what is that?" Jake replied, wrinkling his nose in disgust. "I thought it was just me," I said, glancing at Emma, who looked equally confused. As we continued to drive, the darkness pressed in around us like a shroud. The trees lining the road loomed like shadowy sentinels, their branches swaying in the cool night breeze. We were all quiet now, the only sounds coming from the car's engine and the occasional rustle of leaves. Soon, we approached an old, abandoned house that stood menacingly at the side of the road. Its outline was barely visible in the moonlight, but I could make out the peeling paint and sagging roof. It looked like a ghostly figure watching us with hollow eyes. "What a dump," Ben muttered under his breath, but I could see a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. The house appeared ancient, as if it had been forgotten by time, covered in layers of dust and shadow. I felt a chill run down my spine as we passed it, an urge to look away, battling the curiosity that tugged at me. "Let's check it out," Jake suddenly shouted, a wide grin spreading across his face. The thrill of our earlier adventures had clearly taken hold of him again. "Are you serious?" Emma gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "That place looks creepy." "Come on, it'll be fun," Jake insisted, his excitement infectious. "What's the worst that could happen?" "Fine, but just for a few minutes," I replied, already knowing I wouldn't be able to resist the pull of the unknown. We parked the car, and the moment we stepped out into the cool night air, the smell hit us even harder. It wrapped around us like a thick fog, a mix of decay and mold. Dust hung in the air, but it felt too perfect, as if someone had deliberately crafted the atmosphere to be eerie. It was unsettling, and I had the sudden impression that we weren't alone. As we approached the front door, the old wood creaked under our feet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We hesitated for a moment, glancing at one another, the weight of uncertainty settling over us. The thrill of exploration battled with the instinct to turn around and run. But curiosity won out, and with a deep breath, Jake pushed the door open. It groaned loudly, the sound echoing through the empty house like a warning. Inside, the air was stale and thick, making it hard to breathe. The dim light from our flashlights illuminated the narrow hallway ahead, revealing walls covered in peeling wallpaper, layers of faded colors revealing decades of neglect. We all stood there, staring at the door at the end of the hall, feeling as if it was waiting for us to open it. "What do you think happened here?" Ben asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who cares? Let's explore," Jake replied, his excitement bubbling over. We moved deeper into the house, the floorboards creaking beneath our feet. The first room we entered looked like a typical living room, with old furniture that had clearly seen better days. A cold, dark fireplace stood in one corner, and dusty shelves lined with forgotten books and trinkets seemed to whisper stories of the past. But my attention was drawn to a huge, old mirror on the far wall, framed in tarnished silver. As soon as we stepped inside, the mirror fogged up, as if someone had just breathed on it. I looked around at my friends, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a shadow move across the mirror's surface, but no one else seemed to notice. "Did you see that?" I asked, my heart racing. "See what?" Sarah replied, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Nothing," I said, shaking it off. But the feeling of unease settled deeper in my chest. Something about that mirror felt wrong, like it held secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. Suddenly, with a loud bang, the door slammed shut behind us. I turned around, panic rising in my throat, but no one was there. The reality of our situation sank in, and I felt a chill wash over me. We thought we were alone, but we were wrong. The lights flickered above us, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Just when I thought everything would go dark, the lights came back on, revealing a fire crackling in the fireplace flames that hadn't been there moments before. "Did one of you light that?" I asked, my voice shaky. "No way," Jake said, his bravado fading. "I thought it was out." That's when we heard a laugh. Not a loud laugh, but a quick, sharp giggle echoing from somewhere above us. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice trembling slightly, but no one answered. The mirror fogged up again, and words appeared in the condensation. "The game has begun." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't a cheap haunted house. This was something much more sinister. "We need to leave," I said urgently, but when we turned to the door, it wouldn't budge. It felt as if something was holding it shut from the other side. "Maybe it's just stuck," Ben suggested, but I could see the worry in his eyes. Suddenly, the room began to change. I swear the furniture shifted, and the layout twisted. The walls felt like they were closing in on us, and panic began to set in. "Emma," I shouted, my voice echoing in the strange new space. She was still staring into the mirror, completely transfixed. Ben and Sarah tried to shake her out of it, but it was as if she was lost in another world. "Emma, come back," Ben yelled, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were blank, glued to her reflection, a distant look on her face as if she was seeing something we couldn't. "Emma," I shouted again, fear gripping me. "We need to get her out of here." "She's in some kind of trance," Jake said, his voice filled with worry. "Let's check upstairs." We all nodded, desperate to escape this nightmare. As we moved toward the hallway where the giggling had come from, each step felt like a leap into the unknown. I could feel a strange pressure, as if unseen hands were trying to hold me back. The air grew heavier, and every instinct screamed at me to turn around and flee. Finally, we reached the top of the stairs. The hallway was dark and eerie, the giggling growing louder, echoing off the walls like a mocking song. It felt like the house itself was alive, breathing with some dark energy that sent shivers down my spine. At the end of the hall, we saw a door slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. We pushed it open, revealing a room filled with mirrors. Emma stood in the center, staring at her reflection. But it wasn't her reflection at all. It was someone else twisted and grinning back at us. "Come play with me," the girl in the mirror whispered, her voice sweet yet sinister, laced with a chilling undertone. "You'll never leave." My heart raced as I tried to pull Emma away, but the moment I touched her shoulder, the mirrors cracked, splintering like glass shattering. The sound was deafening, and the world around us began to swirl. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Emma's arm. But the laughter turned to screams as the walls twisted around us, trapping us in a maze of reflections. We ran back into the hallway, but everything felt different now. The walls seemed to shift and pulse, closing in around us. We were disoriented, unable to find our way back. The giggling had turned into an eerie symphony of whispers, taunting us with words we couldn't quite understand. "Where do we go?" Sarah cried out, her voice filled with fear. "Stay close," I shouted, pulling Emma along with me. She seemed dazed, still not fully aware of what was happening. "Emma, we need you to focus," Jake urged, looking back at her with concern. "You have to snap out of it." As we stumbled through the twisted hallway, I felt a dark presence closing in on us, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. Every corner we turned led us deeper into the house's sinister grasp. The whispers grew louder, echoing in our ears, mixing with the sound of our pounding hearts. "Emma, please," I shouted, but her eyes remained distant, as if she was trapped in a dream. "We have to find a way out," Ben said, his voice rising in urgency. "This place is a nightmare." Suddenly, I saw a glimmer of light ahead. "This way!" I shouted, sprinting toward it. We pushed through a door that opened onto a narrow balcony overlooking the living room. Below us, the shadows danced, and the fireplace crackled ominously. "What now?" Sarah gasped, looking around wildly. "We can jump down," Jake said, his eyes wide with determination. "It's our best chance." "Are you crazy?" Ben exclaimed. "What if we hurt ourselves?" "We don't have a choice," Jake replied, glancing back at the shadows creeping closer. "It's this or stay here." With no time to waste, I nodded. "Let's do it." One by one, we jumped down into the living room, landing with a thud. The impact jolted us, but adrenaline surged through my veins. I glanced up at Emma, who was still lost in her trance, her gaze fixed on the mirror. "Emma," I yelled, but she didn't respond. "Help me pull her away," Jake shouted, rushing toward her. Ben and Sarah followed suit, and together we grabbed her arms, trying to pull her from the mirror's grasp. The moment we touched her, the house shook violently. The mirrors rattled and cracked, the laughter morphing into a cacophony of screams. I could feel the floor beneath us shifting, warping, as if the house itself was alive and angry. "Hold on tight," Ben shouted as we tugged harder, our strength fueled by fear. With one final heave, we yanked Emma away from the mirror, and everything fell silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a suffocating stillness. We all breathed heavily, hearts racing as we looked around. "Did we escape?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I think so," I replied, glancing back at the mirror, now cracked but eerily calm. Emma blinked, her eyes finally focusing on us. "What happened?" I don't remember." "You were stuck in there," Jake exclaimed, relief washing over his face. "We thought we lost you." Emma looked around, confusion etched on her features. "We need to leave now," she said, her voice urgent. We turned to leave the living room, but the door we had come through was now gone, replaced by a solid wall. Panic surged through me again. We were trapped. "What do we do?" Ben asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Look for another way out," I said, pushing down the rising fear. "There has to be another door or window." As we searched the room, the air grew colder, and the whispers returned, wrapping around us like a noose. "It's trying to keep us here," I thought, feeling the panic welling up inside me. "Over here," Jake shouted, pointing to a window on the far side of the room. We rushed over, but it was sealed shut. "We can't get it open," Ben said, pushing against the frame. "Try harder," I yelled, my heart racing. "We can't give up now." Just as we were about to lose hope, the window suddenly creaked open. We exchanged shocked glances, the rush of fresh air pouring in like a promise of freedom. "Let's go," I urged, climbing through the window one by one. The moment we were outside, the cold night air hit us like a wave, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. We landed on the soft grass, breathing in the fresh air as we stumbled away from the cursed place. "Did we make it?" Sarah gasped, glancing back at the house. "I think so," I said, my heart still pounding. But as I looked back, I could see the mirrors inside flickering, shadows moving across the glass. "We need to get as far away as possible," Emma said, urgency in her voice. We ran toward the car, the weight of the house lifting off our shoulders with every step. As we reached the car, I glanced back one last time. The windows of the house were dark, but I swore I could see a figure watching us from inside. "Go, go, go!" I shouted, jumping into the back seat as Jake turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and we sped down the road, leaving the haunted house behind. As we drove away, the carnival lights faded into the distance, but the weight of that night lingered in the air. We were safe now, but the memory of what had happened would haunt us forever. Emma sat quietly, staring out the window, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. "What do you think that was?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling a chill run down my spine. "But whatever it was, it wanted us to stay. And we can never go back," Ben added solemnly. As we drove, the road stretched ahead, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness still lingered, waiting for us to let our guard down. We had escaped, but the house, with its eerie mirrors and twisted corridors, would always remain a part of us, a chilling reminder of the night we came face to face with our fears. The car grew quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts as the miles rolled by. The world outside seemed normal, but we knew better. The shadows in the corners of our minds would always whisper of that night, of the haunted house that wanted to claim us as its own. And deep down, I wondered if we would ever truly be free. The mirrors along the walls showed distorted images of ourselves, faces twisted in fear and confusion. I could see the girl from the mirror again, her grin widening as if she was enjoying our panic. "Don't look at them," I yelled, trying to shield Emma's eyes from the reflections. We stumbled into a room filled with old furniture and broken toys, remnants of a life once lived. Dust covered everything like a thick blanket. It felt like a graveyard for forgotten memories. "Over there," Jake pointed to a window at the far end of the room. "We can escape through that." We rushed toward it, but the closer we got, the more the air thickened. I could feel something pulling at my legs, trying to drag me back. "Keep moving," I urged, but the struggle grew harder. Just as we reached the window, the glass shattered with a loud crash, scattering shards everywhere. The sound echoed in the small room, sending a shock of panic through us. "Let's go," Ben yelled, pushing us through the broken window. As I clambered through, I felt something grip my ankle, a cold, clammy hand. I screamed, kicking back, but the grip tightened. I could feel a presence trying to pull me down, back into the darkness of the house. "Help me," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. "Hold on." Jake reached for me, grabbing my arm just as I felt myself being pulled backward. With one hard tug, he pulled me free, and I fell to the ground outside, gasping for breath. The night air felt like a lifeline, fresh and cool against my skin. I looked back at the house, and for a moment, it felt alive. The windows glowed with an eerie light, and shadows danced across the walls, as if they were mocking our escape. "Where's Emma?" Ben cried out, his eyes wide with fear. My heart sank as I realized Emma was still inside. "We can't leave her," I shouted, rising to my feet. "We need to call for help," Sarah yelled, pulling out her phone. But there was no signal. "Let's go back in," Jake said, determination flashing in his eyes. "No," I protested. "We can't. It's too dangerous." But I could see the resolve in his face. He wasn't going to leave Emma behind, and neither was I. Together, we turned back to the house, the looming structure seeming even more threatening now. The door creaked open as if inviting us back inside. "Emma," I shouted, my voice ringing through the empty halls. The echoes answered me, the sound twisting and warping into the haunting giggle that had chased us before. We hesitated, fear creeping back in, but we had no choice. We stepped inside, the air heavy and suffocating. "We have to find her," I said, my voice shaking. As we moved through the darkened halls, the shadows seemed to shift and move, as if they were alive. I felt eyes on us from every corner, watching our every move. "Emma," Ben called, his voice echoing through the house. "Where are you?" Jake added, scanning the dimly lit rooms. We pushed through the first room we had entered, the old furniture looming like ghosts in the dark. The mirror stood in the corner, its surface smooth and reflective, but now it was clouded over. The moment I stepped closer, I felt a chill run down my spine. The words were back, appearing in the fog. "You shouldn't have come back." "No," I whispered, stepping back. "Stay away from that," Jake shouted, pulling me away. But it was too late. The mirror cracked, and in that moment, Emma's face appeared, twisted and distorted. "Help me," she cried, her voice filled with terror. "We're coming," I screamed, reaching out toward her. Suddenly, the room began to change again. The walls shifted, and the furniture rearranged itself as if the house was alive, playing with us. "Run!" Ben shouted, but we were disoriented, the layout twisting in impossible ways. "Emma," I yelled, panic setting in as I realized we were losing her again. We stumbled down the hall, trying to find our way back to the room with the mirrors, hoping to pull her free. The laughter echoed around us, growing louder, drowning out our cries. Finally, we reached the door to the mirror room. It stood slightly ajar, and I pushed it open with shaking hands. The mirrors gleamed in the dim light, reflecting 1,000 versions of ourselves, all twisted and distorted. In the center stood Emma, her eyes wide with terror, staring at her reflection. But it wasn't just her reflection. The girl from before grinned back at us, her eyes filled with darkness. "Come play with me," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. "You'll never leave." "Emma, no," I shouted, rushing toward her. But as I reached for her, the mirrors cracked again, the sound deafening. I could feel the energy in the room shift, the walls closing in around us. "Get away from her," Jake yelled, grabbing Emma's other arm. We pulled her back, but it felt like she was stuck in place, held by some invisible force. The girl in the mirror laughed, a high-pitched sound that sent chills down my spine. "Let her go," I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. But the house seemed to come alive, the walls shaking as if in anger. The giggles turned to screams, echoing through the hallways, drowning out everything else. In a final attempt, I threw myself at Emma, grabbing her with both arms. "We have to leave now." With a tremendous effort, we pulled her away from the mirror, the grip loosening just enough for us to escape. We stumbled back through the door, dragging Emma with us. The laughter faded, replaced by a deafening silence. We ran through the house, the walls shifting around us, but somehow we found our way back to the front door. We burst outside into the cool night air, collapsing onto the ground as the door slammed shut behind us. The house stood still, watching us with its darkened windows. "Is she okay?" Ben asked, breathing heavily as he looked at Emma. She stared blankly ahead, trembling, lost in some dark place we couldn't reach. "We need to get her out of here," I said, feeling a sense of urgency. But as we scrambled to our feet, I looked back at the house, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. The windows glowed with an otherworldly light, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw the girl in the mirror watching us, her grin stretching wide. "Let's go," Jake urged, pulling Emma along with us. As we ran to the car, I felt the weight of the house behind us, a malevolent presence that lingered in the air. The shadows danced in the moonlight, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. We jumped into the car, slamming the doors shut. Jake fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to start the engine. Come on," I shouted, glancing back at the house. It loomed over us, dark and foreboding. Finally, the engine roared to life, and we sped away, leaving the haunted house behind. But as we drove into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't truly escaped. The laughter echoed in my mind, haunting me with every turn of the tires. "What just happened?" Ben asked, looking around at the rest of us. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart still racing. "But we have to tell someone." Emma remained silent, her eyes still vacant, lost in the grip of something we couldn't understand. "Emma?" I reached out to her, but she didn't respond. As we drove on, the darkness of the night pressed in around us. The laughter seemed to linger, following us as we sped away. And deep down, I knew we hadn't seen the last of that house or the girl in the mirror.